Everybody sing that shit.
Peter Johnson quietly launched the football revolution in Panama. The photograph taken in Norway sailed around the world via WhatsApp and landed with a ping onto the phone of Peter Johnson in Panama. He opened it to find four footballers he knew well smiling down the lens, barely able to contain their excitement. Gabriel Torres, Anibal Godoy, Joseph Calderon and Roman Torres were about to play in their final warm-up friendly before moving on to Russia in the World Cup. They were thinking of the man who helped them on the way, the Englishman who quietly launched a revolution in Panamanian football at the turn of the century, and they were keen to let him know. Johnson did not deliberately set out with this intention, but his vision, dedication and more than $1 million of his own money made it happen. So when England and Panama meet on June 24 in Nizhny Novgorod, his loyalties will be tested. "I will be very proud and very emotional," said the 69-year-old. "Roman will be leading them out as captain and I will have to be with Panama. They will fight. They will be number one in terms of fight and spirit, and if they get 1 point they will have done well and I will be cheering them on." Johnson was born in Oldbury in the Black Country and raised as a West Bromwich Albion supporter before the Merchant Navy led him around the world. It was 1974 when he arrived in Panama, and there he remains, having recently retired from his job as a partner in a ship's agent company at the Panama Canal. When his son was born and found football opportunities were scarce in a nation obsessed by baseball, he hatched a plan to set up his own club, only one with a difference. Project 2000, as it was called, aimed to combine football with social and educational opportunities for the young players, many of whom came from areas in the grip of drugs, crime and gang culture. Roman Torres, who became a national hero with a goal against Costa Rica in October to clinch a place at the World Cup, and goalkeeper Calderon were part of the first intake. They started playing locally, traveled to games in Costa Rica and entered the Dallas Cup in the USA when Johnson invited his friend Gary Stemple to assess their standard. Stemple was a coach who was born in Panama and raised in London and broke into football as a community officer at Millwall before returning to Central America, where his career has flourished. He has had 4 spells in charge of San Francisco, one of Panama's biggest clubs, and coached the national team at different age levels, including the senior team, and he was impressed. Johnson provided kit, hired coaches, supplied a small bus for transport and fed the players. Football got the boys off the streets, and he nurtured relationships with schools to make sure they were attending lessons, developed scholarship programs and later started to pay the players, initially only $1 or $2. "It really became a family," said Johnson. "The difference between us and other clubs was that we were doing youth work. The main thing was the discipline and organization they felt they had. Something they could rely on. They had something to look forward to. Even when we reached a professional level, it was never about results, it was to get the kids out and focused and to stabilize them. At the same time, it really did help to develop football because bigger clubs with more money saw the success and started to follow our model." Project 2000 became Deportivo Chipo and were soon dominating the youth scene, pulling in the best players as their reputation grew, and Johnson funded them to travel and compete in tournaments in Europe, including in England and Spain. Soon the impact reached international football. At the Under-20 World Cup in the United Arab Emirates in 2003, the nation's first goal was scored by Armando Gun of Chipo. 2 years later at the U20 World Cup in Holland, there were 7 Chipo players in the squad, including Gun, Calderon and Roman Torres. Real Madrid were the only club with more players at the tournament. Chipo turned professional as the young players matured and reached the top flight of Panamanian football in 2007 and survived for nearly a decade. They were never relegated, finishing as runners-up in both the Apertura and Clausura campaigns of 2012. Players they produced have enjoyed careers around the world. Roman Torres had trials in England with West Ham, Nottingham Forest and Coventry among others, and the central defender plays now for Seattle Sounders. Johnson and Stemple went with Gabriel Torres when the striker was invited for 2 trials at Manchester United. "There is a downside to working with boys from dangerous areas," said Johnson. "Drugs flow freely up the coast, there is crime and there are gangs. 2 of my players were killed, shot, one when he was only 16 years old and the other when he was slightly older but still a teenager, and 4 or 5 might be in jail." It is a story tinged with sadness. Johnson ensured Cheapo remained true to their principles of youth development until he reluctantly closed the club in 2016 when he retired from his job. The financial demands were increasing and could not be offset by sponsorship and a small fan base. Wealthier clubs had cottoned on and were investing more heavily in youth development. "Pete is a quiet guy who has never liked the limelight but has had a very influential role," said Stempel. "Just look at the number of players who have gone through Cheapo. He supported their development and gave them financial help and a better education. Even the chance to get on a plane and travel to Europe. For these inner-city kids those opportunities cannot be underestimated." His legacy can be seen in a snapshot from Norway of 4 young men flying the flag for a proud nation as Panama reaches fever pitch in anticipation of its first World Cup finals.